do pretty damn near everything else, and somehow I'm still here.
At 85, George Hamilton should have been untouchable, a Hollywood survivor, a man who outlived scandals, trends, and even his own reputation. Instead, he was sitting alone in a sterile doctor's office, staring at test results he never wanted to see again, the kind of room where time slows down and silence feels louder than applause ever did. The cancer was back. This time, there was no glamour attached, no red carpets, no cameras, no flattering lights, just cold numbers, medical charts, procedures, and bills that didn't care who he used to be. The man who once dated Elizabeth Taylor, slept in the White House, and made millions was suddenly facing something terrifyingly ordinary: survival without security. His fortune was gone, the mansion he lived in for decades on the market, and the body that carried him through Hollywood for over half a century was finally pushing back. What made this moment sting wasn't just illness, it was irony. George Hamilton built his entire life on reinvention. When roles dried up, he pivoted. When scandals followed, he smiled through them. When the industry moved on, he turned himself into a brand. But how do you reinvent yourself when time itself becomes the enemy? This isn't just a celebrity story, it's a human one. A story about charm used as armor, fame used as camouflage, and the quiet panic that sets in when both stop working. Because behind the tan, the jokes, and the perfectly timed smile, George Hamilton has been running from something his entire life: instability, loss, and the fear of becoming invisible. And now, there's nowhere left to run. George Hamilton wasn't born into stability. He was born into motion. Memphis, Tennessee, 1939. A northern band leader father, a southern belle mother from Arkansas. It sounded glamorous on paper. In reality, it meant constant movement. His father's music career kept the family traveling from one city to another. Hotels replaced homes, suitcases replaced routines, goodbyes became normal. George learned early how to adapt, how to read rooms, and how to smile through uncertainty. He didn't realize it then, but this was his first acting lesson. Then came the rupture. In 1944, his father had an affair with a singer from his band. The marriage collapsed. George was only 5. The divorce didn't just break a family, it erased safety. His father left, his mother was suddenly alone, and childhood innocence quietly disappeared. For a brief moment, life softened. Living with his grandparents in Arkansas gave George something he'd never really known: peace, a home that didn't move, meals at the same table, a sense of belonging. But it didn't last. By 1947, both grandparents were gone. 2 deaths, 1 year, and just like that, the last anchor vanished. With no money and no support, his mother flipped a coin: New York or Hollywood? The coin landed on Hollywood. That single, desperate toss, random and unplanned, changed everything. They packed up and moved west, chasing a dream that hadn't even fully formed yet. But destiny didn't arrive gently. Schools changed, homes shifted, stability stayed out of reach. By his teenage years, George learned a lesson that would define his life. If you can't control the world around you, control how people see you. And that lesson would become his greatest weapon. Military school didn't just educate George Hamilton, it reshaped him. Discipline, posture, control. At Gulf Coast Military Academy, he learned how to stand straight, how to speak calmly, how to command attention without raising his voice. He learned how to perform even when everything inside felt fractured. Order on the outside, chaos kept hidden. But behind the polished exterior was a private darkness he never talked about, a secret relationship, a line crossed far too early, a silence that lasted decades. That silence hardened into armor. By the time George turned 19, Hollywood came calling. MGM didn't care about training or technique, they cared about presence. He looked like a movie star, and that was enough to earn a screen test. Crime and Punishment USA wasn't supposed to be his breakthrough. The studio wanted someone else. They preferred a safer name, someone proven. But George delivered something no one expected: vulnerability. His performance was cold, haunted, and deeply human. He played guilt like a shadow that never left. Critics noticed, awards followed, a Golden Globe, a BAFTA nomination, and still, Hollywood didn't trust him. He wasn't taken seriously. He was seen as pretty, not powerful, replaceable, temporary. So George hustled. He begged for airtime,
bribed his way into television appearances, smiled through rejection like it was part of the job. Then he made a bold choice. He branded himself. The tan wasn't vanity, it was strategy. In a city overflowing with handsome men, George Hamilton made himself unforgettable. He leaned into the image, joked about it, owned it. The tan became his signature, his shield, his way of staying visible when roles disappeared. And it worked. By the early 1960s, George Hamilton was everywhere. Movies, premieres, magazine covers, he had finally arrived. Then he met Linda Bird Johnson, the president's daughter. What started as a personal connection quickly became a national spectacle. Cameras followed them everywhere. Red carpets turned into political events. White House dinners felt more like press conferences. Whispers grew louder. But President Lyndon Johnson wasn't amused. To him, George wasn't a charming actor. He was a potential liability. So the president did something chilling. He ordered an FBI investigation. Not a routine background check, a full excavation. They dug into George's friends, his finances, his family, even rumors about his sexuality. In that era, whispers alone could destroy careers. George felt the walls closing in. Then came the ranch, a surprise invitation, a hunting trip in Texas that wasn't about hunting. Johnson handed him a gun and locked eyes with him. No words were needed. The message was clear. I'm watching you. George understood the power imbalance instantly. This wasn't romance anymore. It was politics. When pressure mounted, draft questions, public scrutiny, and political tension, the relationship ended. Quietly, cleanly, no drama. But the mark stayed. For a brief, surreal moment, a Hollywood actor came dangerously close to becoming part of America's most powerful family, and learned exactly how fragile that privilege truly is. The Philippines changed everything. What began as a glamorous celebrity friendship slowly unraveled into something far darker. Private jets, presidential palaces, lavish film festivals. From the outside, it looked like harmless star power mixed with international politics. Behind the scenes, money was moving. Millions passed through accounts tied to George Hamilton. Loans appeared with no clear explanations. Names surfaced in federal indictments connected to one of the largest corruption scandals of the 20th century. George wasn't charged. No handcuffs, no prison cell, no conviction. But in the public eye, that didn't matter. His name appeared in court documents. He was labeled an unindicted co-conspirator. And in Hollywood, perception can be more damaging than guilt. George insisted he was naive, used, unaware.
He claimed he never understood where the money came from, that he trusted the wrong people, that he returned funds once he realized something was wrong. Maybe he was telling the truth, but the court of public opinion had already decided. Hollywood quietly pulled back. Phone calls slowed. Invitations disappeared. Studios stopped taking chances. No one wanted controversy attached to their projects. George had survived scandals before, but this one felt different. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't romantic. It was political, financial, and deeply uncomfortable. The damage lingered long after the headlines faded. Once again, George Hamilton faced the same familiar moment, the one where the spotlight moves on and you're left standing alone. And once again, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He reinvented. Elizabeth Taylor came into George Hamilton's life like a thunderstorm. Brilliant, intense, unforgettable, and fleeting. Their romance was passionate, dramatic, and very public. When it ended, it left behind stories, laughter, and a solid gold Cartier keepsake that perfectly captured Elizabeth's wild spirit. But the woman who truly stayed wasn't Elizabeth, it was Alana Stewart. Even after divorce, they didn't just co-parent, they built something rare in Hollywood, a family that refused to fall apart. They raised their son together, they stayed close, they talked daily. They showed up for each other in ways most married couples never do. Their bond wasn't romantic, it was deeper. Trust, history, mutual survival. Alana remarried. George dated other women. Life moved forward, but their connection never broke. They had dinner together, shared jokes, leaned on each other during hard times. George once admitted that after the divorce, he'd feel something missing and then realize it was Lana, not as a wife, as a constant. In an industry built on breakups and bitterness, their loyalty felt almost rebellious. George learned something rare through that relationship. Love doesn't always look like marriage. Sometimes it looks like staying, showing up, having someone's back when the cameras are gone. And in a life full of exits, Alana never walked away.
Fame can distract you from reality. The body never does. George Hamilton learned that the hard way. First, it was hearing loss, damage from childhood illness that quietly shaped how he moved through the world. He hid it, adapted, smiled through it. Then came heart trouble, major surgery, a reminder that charm doesn't stop time. And finally, cancer. Each diagnosis stripped away another illusion, another layer of control. Yet George refused to slow down. He trained like a man decades younger, swam, lifted weights, drank green shakes, and talked discipline like a lifestyle coach. He marketed skincare, laughed at himself in KFC commercials, turned aging into a punchline. Self-awareness became his final brand. But beneath the humor was urgency. George knew time was running out, that every morning mattered, every conversation counted, every chance to reinvent might be the last. Health didn't soften him, it sharpened him. Because when the applause fades and the body pushes back, what remains isn't fame, it's the will to keep going. And George Hamilton wasn't done yet. Losing millions to a crooked business manager should have ended George Hamilton. For 4 years, his money drained away through fake real estate deals and empty promises. By the time the truth surfaced, nearly $12 million were gone. At an age when most people are protecting legacies, George was protecting what little remained. Instead of collapsing, he pivoted. Florida. Not for beaches, not for nostalgia, for survival. Florida's asset protection laws gave him one last shield. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't heroic, it was practical. And for the first time in a long while, George Hamilton made a move that had nothing to do with image and everything to do with staying afloat. At 86, his life runs on quiet discipline. He wakes before sunrise, meditates, swims laps while the world sleeps. There are no cameras, no audience, just repetition, breath, persistence. He still works on new ideas, still talks about projects that may never happen, still jokes about running for mayor, as if humor alone could keep the future close. But the dreams have changed. He no longer chases fame. He doesn't crave relevance. He wants time. Time to move without pain. Time to stay sharp. Time to watch his sons become men. This fight isn't loud. There are no headlines for it. It's fought in early mornings, doctor visits, and financial decisions no one ever sees. And that's the truth about survival. It isn't glamorous. It's stubborn. George Hamilton didn't conquer Hollywood. He outlasted it. Studios rose and fell. Trends came and went. Faces disappeared. George stayed. Sometimes at the center, sometimes at the edges, but always moving forward. His story isn't about perfection. It's about endurance. Charm wasn't just a gift. It was armor. Reinvention wasn't ambition. It was oxygen. Every time the industry closed a door, George found a window. When youth faded, he leaned into self-awareness. When scandals followed, he kept smiling. When money vanished, he adapted again. And now, in the quiet chapters of his life, something clearer has emerged. Legacy isn't measured in mansions or bank accounts. It lives in memory. In sons who know their father showed up. In friendships that survived divorce and decades. In stories that refuse to disappear. George understands the final truth most people avoid. You can survive almost anything except time. Time takes fame, it takes beauty, it takes control. What it leaves behind is who you were when it mattered. And by that measure, George Hamilton didn't fail. He endured. Not perfectly, not quietly, but honestly. And sometimes, that's the only victory that counts.